I had been with Anderson West for 6 years. 6 long years of early mornings and late nights, of skipped lunches and canceled plans. I poured everything I had into that company. I believed in the work. I believed in the vision. More than that, I believed they saw something in me worth investing in. I stayed through the chaos, through the restructures, through the times when paychecks came late. I even slept under my desk once during a deadline crunch, waking up with keyboard marks on my cheek. My coworkers joked about my dedication, but I wore it like a badge of honor. I thought loyalty mattered. I thought hard work was enough. I thought that if I just kept pushing, kept proving myself, kept showing up, eventually I would be seen. Not just as another employee, but as someone who could lead. Someone who could shape the future of the company. That morning, walking into the headquarters with my portfolio tucked under my arm, I genuinely believed I was about to change my life. I had no idea I was walking straight into the moment that would shatter me completely. The pitch I carried that day was not something I threw together overnight. I had spent months researching, refining, and perfecting every detail. It was a plan for an affordable design arm that would serve small businesses, startups, and nonprofits. I saw the gap in the market. Anderson West catered to corporate giants with budgets that could fund small countries. But there were thousands of entrepreneurs out there who needed quality branding and could not afford our rates. I believed we could tap into that market and do good while doing well. The numbers made sense. The testimonials I gathered supported it. I even had mock-ups, sample packages, and a 3-year projection. My hands shook slightly as I printed the final slides the night before. This was not just a pitch. This was my legacy. This was the idea that would prove I was more than just a worker bee. I practiced my delivery in the mirror, timed myself, adjusted my tone. I wanted to sound confident but not arrogant, passionate but not desperate. I believed in this so much it hurt. What I did not see coming was how quickly belief could be crushed. The boardroom was intimidating. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, and the long glass table reflected everyone's faces like a mirror. I stood at the front, my heart hammering in my chest as I clicked through my slides. I spoke clearly, passionately, painting a picture of what we could build together. I talked about impact, about community, about untapped revenue streams. I made eye contact with each board member, watching for nods, for signs of agreement. Some looked interested. Others looked bored. But the CEO, Richard Anderson, sat at the head of the table with his arms crossed and his jaw tight. When I finished, there was silence. Long, thick, suffocating silence. I stood there, gripping the remote, waiting for someone to speak. And then it happened. Richard let out a laugh. It was not a polite chuckle or a nervous release of tension. It was sharp, cruel, and deliberate. He leaned back in his chair, shaking his head like I had just told the funniest joke he had ever heard. My stomach dropped. My face went hot. I looked around the table, hoping someone would defend me, but everyone just stared down at their notebooks. The laughter echoed louder than anything I had said in that entire presentation. Richard finally stopped laughing and looked at me with something close to pity. He tilted his head and said, "Are you done pretending to be one of us?" The words hit me like a slap. I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. He continued, his tone casual, almost bored. "You are a good worker, bee. I will give you that. But this is CEO-level thinking, and frankly, you have lost touch with reality." He gestured at my slides like they were kindergarten drawings. "You would be better off designing wedding brochures than playing boss." A few people around the table shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke up. No one said, "Wait, let's hear her out." No one said, "That's too harsh." They just sat there. Richard stood up and straightened his tie. "I think it is time we part ways. Effective immediately." My heart stopped. "What?" I whispered. "You are fired," he said, like he was ordering coffee. "Security will escort you out. Thank you for your service." And just like that, 6 years of my life were erased. I stood there, frozen, as he walked out of the room without looking back. 2 security guards appeared at the door within minutes. They were polite but firm, flanking me as I gathered nothing, because I was not allowed to go back to my desk. My personal items, they said, would be mailed to me. I walked through the open office space in a daze, my face burning with humiliation. People stared. Some looked shocked. Others looked away quickly, pretending they had not seen anything. The team I had led for 3 years, the people I had mentored and fought for, said nothing. Not one of them stood up. Not one of them asked what happened. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. But I held it together, keeping my chin up even though my hands were trembling. The elevator ride down felt like it lasted a lifetime. I stared at my distorted reflection in the metal doors, barely recognizing the woman staring back at me. When the doors finally opened to the lobby, I walked out into the bright afternoon sun, and the weight of what had just happened hit me all at once. I made it to my car, locked the doors, and completely fell apart. I cried in my car for over an hour. Ugly, gut-wrenching sobs that left my chest aching and my eyes swollen. I could not believe it. 6 years of sacrifice, of loyalty, of late nights and missed birthdays, gone in a single meeting. My savings account was painfully thin. I had been living paycheck to paycheck, convinced that a promotion was coming, that my hard work would pay off eventually. Now, I had nothing. No job. No backup plan. No safety net. Over the next few weeks, I applied for everything. Positions I was overqualified for, positions that paid half what I used to make, positions in completely different industries. I got ghosted by recruiters. I got rejection emails that felt like form letters. I got silence. The worst part was not the rejection. It was the doubt that started creeping in. Maybe Richard was right. Maybe I had been delusional. Maybe I was not cut out for leadership. Maybe I was just a worker bee after all. But late at night, staring at the ceiling, I made myself a promise. That boardroom would not be the end of my story. I refused to let his laughter be the last word. A month after I was fired, an old college friend named Tasha reached out. She had just opened a bakery and needed help with her branding. She could not afford much, maybe a few $100s, but she was desperate. I almost said no. I was drowning in my own problems. But something in her voice reminded me why I loved design in the first place. So I said yes. I met her at her tiny bakery, which smelled like butter and sugar and hope. She showed me her hand-drawn logo, her mismatched signage, her menu that looked like it was made in Microsoft Word. I saw the potential immediately. I spent 2 weeks designing her a full brand identity. Logo, menu, packaging, social media templates. I did not charge her much because I knew she was struggling too. When I handed over the files, she cried. 3 months later, she called me, screaming with excitement. Her business had tripled. People were coming in because of the branding. They were posting photos of her packaging online. She was hiring staff. She told me I had saved her dream. And in that moment, sitting in my cramped apartment, something inside me came back to life. Maybe I was not done after all. Word spread faster than I expected. Tasha told her friends. Her friends told their friends. Suddenly, I had emails from small business owners asking for help. A coffee shop owner. A yoga instructor. A guy starting a dog walking service. None of them could afford Anderson West's rates, but they could afford me. I did not even have a business name yet. I was just working out of my kitchen, my laptop balanced on a pile of books, fueled by cheap coffee and something that felt a lot like spite. Every time I sent a proposal, every time I designed a logo, every time I helped someone build their brand, I thought about Richard's laugh. I thought about the way he dismissed me, the way he made me feel small. And I used it. I let it fuel me. I let it push me to work harder, to be better, to prove that I was not just a worker bee. I was building something. Slowly, carefully, one client at a time. I was building the very thing he said I could never do. And with every email that said yes, with every thank you note, with every referral, I felt a little more like myself again. 6 months in, I made my first hire. Her name was Marissa, a junior designer fresh out of school with a portfolio full of potential and a resume full of rejection letters. I saw myself in her. I remembered what it felt like to be overlooked, to be told you were not good enough. So I took a chance on her. I paid her fairly, more than I probably should have at that stage, but I did not care. I let her lead projects. I gave her credit. I let her shine. I never wanted her to feel the way I had felt in that boardroom. Marissa was hungry and talented, and watching her grow reminded me why I started this in the first place. It was not just about proving Richard wrong. It was about building something better. A place where people were valued. Where ideas mattered more than ego. Where no one would ever be laughed out of a room for dreaming too big. I swore to myself that I would never become like them. I would never let power turn me cruel. I would lead the way I wished I had been led. By the end of the first year, we were growing faster than I ever imagined. I needed office space. I hired an intern, then another designer, then an accountant to help me manage the chaos. We were no longer just me working out of my kitchen. We were becoming a real company. I was not playing CEO anymore. I was living it. Clients kept coming. Referrals kept pouring in. We were landing projects that made my heart race, that challenged me, that reminded me why I love this work. I was building the company I had begged Anderson West to see. The one Richard had laughed at. The one he said was not realistic. Except it was real. It was growing. And it was mine. I rented a small office space with exposed brick and big windows. I bought a coffee machine and a couch. I put up a whiteboard where we brainstormed ideas. It felt like home. It felt like the opposite of that cold, glass boardroom. And every time I walked through that door, every time I saw my team working, laughing, creating, I felt something I had not felt in years. Pride. We needed a name. Something that captured what we were trying to do, what we stood for. I spent weeks brainstorming, writing lists, testing words. Then it hit me one night while I was driving home. Lighthouse. Because small businesses needed someone to guide them through the noise, through the confusion, through the darkness of trying to build something from nothing. That was what we were. A lighthouse. I did not want to compete with Anderson West. I did not want to be them. I wanted to become the company that made them irrelevant. The company that proved there was a better way to do business. A way that valued people over profit, impact over image, substance over status. I registered the name the next day. Lighthouse Design Company. It felt right. It felt like the beginning of something bigger than me. Something that could outlast my anger, my hurt, my need for revenge. Something that could actually change the industry. I put the logo on our website, on our business cards, on the wall of our office. And every time I saw it, I smiled. A year and a half after I was fired, I spoke at a small design conference. I was terrified. Public speaking had never been my thing, and I kept thinking about that boardroom, about standing in front of people who did not believe in me. But I pushed through. I talked about building a business from scratch, about serving underserved markets, about the power of good design. After my talk, a man in a suit approached me. He handed me his card. He worked for a large tech firm that was expanding rapidly and needed a full rebrand. He said my approach resonated with him. He wanted to work with Lighthouse. That one contract changed everything. It was our biggest project yet, worth more than I had made in my entire first year. It gave us credibility. It gave us momentum. It gave us proof that we were not just a scrappy startup anymore. We were legitimate. We were growing. And we were just getting started. I framed that business card and hung it in my office as a reminder. One yes can change everything. We started getting recognized. A local business magazine did a feature on us. Then a podcast invited me to talk about bootstrapping a company. Then a morning TV segment highlighted Lighthouse as a company to watch. People started calling me a visionary, calling me innovative, calling me a leader. It was surreal. 5 years ago, I was just an assistant with opinions. I was the person who got laughed out of a boardroom. Now, I was being asked for advice. I was being invited to speak. I was being seen. But the recognition was not what mattered most. What mattered was the impact. The emails from clients saying we changed their business. The thank you notes from designers saying we gave them their first break. The knowledge that we were building something that mattered. Still, I would be lying if I said it did not feel good. It felt like vindication. Like proof that I was not crazy for believing in myself when no one else did. Like proof that Richard had been wrong. Then, the rumor started. One of my old coworkers from Anderson West reached out. We had stayed in touch loosely over the years, exchanging occasional messages. But this time, her message was different. She told me things were bad at Anderson West. Really bad. They were losing clients. They had done 2 rounds of layoffs. Leadership was in chaos. Richard was barely showing up to the office anymore. She said morale was at an all-time low and people were jumping ship. I read the message 3 times. Part of me felt vindicated. Part of me felt sad. I had spent 6 years there. I had friends there. People I cared about. But another part of me, the part that still remembered the sting of that laugh, felt something else. I tried not to smile. I really did. But I could not help it. The empire that had cast me aside was crumbling. And I was thriving. Karma, it seemed, had a sense of timing. Then came the call I never expected. My phone rang one afternoon, and the name on the screen made my stomach flip. Richard Anderson. I stared at it, debating whether to answer. Curiosity won. I picked up. His voice was warm, friendly, like we were old colleagues catching up. He said he had been following my success. He said he always admired my hustle. He said he wanted to meet, to talk about potential opportunities. I almost laughed. But instead, I stayed calm. I stayed professional. I said I would think about it. After I hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. He did not apologize. He did not acknowledge what he had done. He acted like we were friends. Like he had not destroyed me. But I was not the same person he had fired. I was not scared anymore. I was not small. So I called him back. And I said yes. I agreed to meet. Not because I forgave him, but because I wanted to see what desperation looked like up close. Walking back into that building felt like stepping into a memory. Everything looked the same. The same marble lobby. The same glass elevators. The same boardroom with the floor-to-ceiling windows. But I was different. I was not the woman who had been escorted out by security. I was not the one begging to be heard. This time, I was the one they needed. Richard greeted me with a firm handshake and a smile that did not reach his eyes. The board members sat around the table, looking tired, looking desperate. They asked about Lighthouse. They complimented my success. They asked questions about my process, my team, my vision. And I answered. Calmly. Confidently. They listened. They nodded. They took notes. The irony was almost too much. 5 years ago, they had laughed at me. Now, they hung on every word. Richard did not recognize the fire he had lit inside me that day. He thought he had broken me. He had no idea he had built me. Then came the real reason for the meeting. Anderson West needed help. They needed a rebrand. They needed to rebuild their image, reconnect with clients, and recover from the damage of the last few years. And they wanted Lighthouse to do it. Richard leaned forward, his hands folded on the table. He said they wanted my designs, my strategy, my expertise. He said they wanted to partner with the best. I let the words hang in the air for a moment. Then I named my price. It was not small. It was double what I would normally charge. Maybe more. I watched their faces. Some of them flinched. Richard cleared his throat and said it was steep. I leaned back in my chair and smiled. I said, "You taught me my worth." The room went silent. He did not laugh this time. After a long pause, he said they would need to discuss it. I stood up, shook his hand, and told him to take his time. I did not need them. But they needed me. And we both knew it. The negotiations took weeks. Richard tried to haggle. He tried to lower the scope, reduce the budget, find compromises. But I did not budge. Not once. Every time he pushed back, I reminded him of the value Lighthouse brought. I reminded him of our track record, our reputation, our results. He called me difficult. I told him, "You taught me to be." He did not like that. But he could not argue. The truth was, they were desperate. They had burned through 2 other agencies already. Their rebrand attempts had failed. They were out of options. Finally, he caved. He agreed to my terms. Full building redesign. Full rebrand. Led by Lighthouse. And buried in the contract was a clause that gave us full creative control over the exterior visuals. I made sure of it. Richard signed without reading the fine print. That was his first mistake. His second mistake was thinking I had forgotten what he did to me. I had not. Not for a single day. As our team began the project, something else started happening. Employees at Anderson West started leaving. Some reached out to me directly, asking if Lighthouse was hiring. Others just wanted out, tired of the toxic environment, the instability, the lack of leadership. I hired 3 of them. People I had worked with before. People I trusted. People who deserved better. Richard stopped showing up to meetings. He delegated everything to his VP, who looked more stressed every time I saw him. The empire Richard had built was crumbling quietly, one resignation letter at a time. Meanwhile, Lighthouse was thriving. We were expanding. We were winning awards. We were being featured in national publications. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Every time I walked into Anderson West's offices, I felt the weight of what was happening. They were sinking. And I was rising. It almost felt poetic. We presented the final logo and building wrap design in that same boardroom. The same one where I had been humiliated. I stood at the front, clicking through slides, just like I had 5 years ago. But this time, they loved it. They nodded. They smiled. They said it was exactly what they needed. Richard sat at the head of the table, his face tight, his jaw clenched. He approved it with a forced smile, barely making eye contact. I do not think he realized what he had agreed to. I do not think he understood the vision. Or maybe he did, and he just did not care anymore. Either way, it did not matter. The contract was signed. The design was final. And I had full creative control. As I packed up my laptop, I glanced at him one last time. He looked smaller somehow. Older. Tired. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. A few months later, the news broke. Anderson West could not keep their lease. The building was too expensive, and they were downsizing significantly. They were moving to a smaller office across town. The announcement sent shockwaves through the industry. People speculated about bankruptcy, about closure, about the end of an era. I made a quiet move. Through a partner shell company, I bought the building. No press. No announcements. Just a clean, quiet transaction. No one at Anderson West knew. Not yet. I planned the renovation carefully. New interiors. new branding, and most importantly, a new exterior. The construction team worked fast. Within weeks, scaffolding surrounded the building. And then came the day I had been waiting for. The day they unveiled the new logo. The day Lighthouse took over the skyline. I stood across the street, watching as the scaffolding came down. The new logo covered the entire building. Sleek, bold, silver letters that caught the sunlight and gleamed like a beacon. Lighthouse. My company. My vision. My name. It was bigger than I ever imagined. More beautiful. More powerful. I saw Richard walking down the sidewalk, coffee in hand, probably heading to whatever temporary office they had set up. He stopped. He looked up. His face went pale. His mouth fell open. The coffee cup slipped from his hand and splattered on the pavement. He stared at the building, at the logo, at the name that was not his. And for a moment, time stopped. I watched him from across the street, my arms crossed, a small smile on my face. He finally looked around, as if searching for answers, and his eyes landed on me. We locked eyes. I did not move. I did not wave. I just stood there, letting him see me, letting him understand. His expression was a mixture of shock, disbelief, and something that looked a lot like regret. I will never forget that look. Not as long as I live. I walked across the street slowly, confidently, my heels clicking on the pavement. My team was behind me, carrying boxes, chatting excitedly about the new space. Richard stood frozen on the sidewalk, still staring up at the building. As I reached the entrance, he finally found his voice. You bought it?" he stammered. I stopped and looked at him. Really looked at him. "I did," I said simply. "But how?" he asked, his voice shaking. I smiled. "You taught me a lot, Richard. You taught me that loyalty does not matter. That hard work is not enough. That the only thing that matters is power." I paused. "So I built my own." He opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. I stepped past him and walked through the glass doors. My team followed. Inside, workers were removing the old Anderson West nameplate from the lobby wall. In its place, they were installing a new one. Lighthouse Design Company. Richard stood outside, speechless, watching through the glass as his old world was erased and mine took its place. I took the elevator to the top floor, to the executive suite, to the boardroom. The same boardroom where I had been laughed at. Where I had been told I was not good enough. Where my dreams had been crushed. But now it was mine. I stood at the head of the table, running my hand along the smooth glass surface. My team filed in, setting up laptops, unpacking supplies, claiming their new workspace. Marissa grinned at me from across the room. "This is insane," she said. I laughed. "Yeah, it really is." I looked out the floor to ceiling windows at the city below. The same view Richard had looked at for years. The same skyline. But everything had changed. I had changed. I was not the scared, broken woman who had been escorted out by security. I was not the one who cried in her car for an hour. I was the CEO. I was the visionary. I was the one who rebuilt herself from nothing and turned pain into power. And I did it my way. With integrity. With kindness. With a vision bigger than revenge. I called my team into the boardroom for our first official meeting. They sat around the table, buzzing with excitement, talking over each other, throwing out ideas. I stood at the front, just like I had all those years ago. But this time, no one was laughing. This time, everyone was listening. I looked at each of them, at the people who had believed in me, who had worked beside me, who had helped me build something worth building. And I felt a wave of gratitude so strong it almost knocked me over. I cleared my throat, and the room went quiet. I smiled. "Let's build better," I said. And we did. We built a company rooted in respect, in creativity, in opportunity. We built something that proved success does not have to come at the cost of your soul. We built Lighthouse. And every single day, when I walk into that building, when I see that logo shining over the skyline, I remember where I came from. I remember the laugh. I remember the shame. I remember the pain. And I remember that I survived it. More than that, I turned it into something beautiful. That boardroom no longer haunts me. It belongs to me now. And so does my story. If you have a similar story or know someone who does, share your story in the comment section and what you did to overcome.